how do the webinars work? I'm always asked that question. And over the years, I'm realizing more and more, or becoming more conscious of how the fields are working. We are spirit in a physical body. So before we come into this body, we are aware that all is possible, that there's no limitations. We have direct access to universal consciousness, and we have the ability to manifest anything that we connect to as a creator. So as we drop down into this vessel, into this body, so you're dropping down into a body full of genetic information. So if you see, I see the physical body made up of genetic memory fields and genetic timelines, or ancestral memory stories, if you want to call them, on all levels. It could be beautiful stories, it could be beautiful gifts which are there of creation, of consciousness, which the ancestors evolved, and then they're passing you on those gifts. Or it could be different trauma which they experienced, for example, through war or abuse, and those memory fields are passed on. Now, as you drop into the body, into the genetics, you're dropping into a field of genetic memory fields. Also, you're dropping into, or you're developing, as you're living your life, as you're watching the news, for example, you're being programmed from the news. You're being programmed by what you see in movies. You're being programmed by the people's belief systems around you. Your schooling, the medical system, on all levels. So, for example, I remember years ago, I was working in a group and one lady jumped up and says, "Hallelujah, I'm healed. And this is what I had." And my system reacted saying, "How can you say that? You need the doctor's certificate to say you must wait a year before you get those results. It will come back." That was in my system. Now, that was not the truth in the system. That was coming from my stories, my programming that was passed on from my ancestors, my parents, and also what I experienced in my own life up to now, up to that moment in time, not now. So we are a living field of stories, genetic stories. We are also manifesting those stories. So if you imagine spirit, your spirit dropping, as that spirit, your spirit knows everything's possible and have access to the stars and back. And then you drop down into a vessel, like little stories activating as you engage into the cell. So as you engage into the DNA, then all these stories will start activating. Or if you want to see it like an old movie reel, that certain triggers will activate the stories which are in your genetics. So as you experience life, something's going to trigger you. It's going to press play in those stories, which will give you an opportunity to transform what is in your system and to transform those stories. Because then now you're activating and transforming what's in the ancestral history, which is in your genetics. That's why I often work with genetic places. And also that's why I worked with the twins so much, because if you're in a twin system, you're in the wrong system. So you're in double stories, and those stories that don't belong to you in this, if it's not your vessel, you cannot transform them. So when you drop a spirit into this vessel, into your vessel, then your spirit activates the stories that's in your system because you're here to resolve them. Now, those stories go out and then come back to you. So that becomes you. That becomes your reality, because your spirit now has activated the movie reels. Now they're playing and it comes back to you. So it mirrors back to you. So you you believe you are the stories. That is your reality. That is your limitations. That's as far as you allow your spirit to evolve, because that is capping your abilities to heal, for example, to manifest, for example. The stories are the limits. The mindsets are caps on the system. Now, if you meditate, you will suddenly gain access to your spirit that you realize all is possible. So in the webinars, what I'm holding space for, and each of the webinars have certain themes. So I'm being guided to bring down information for transforming a certain topic, which then will open up those specific genetic memory fields, for example, to transform them to remember you are whole already and there's no limitations. Now, when you enter the system of the webinar, this is a different system now that we're creating. So now we're creating a timeline. So we're entering a timeline together. So we're now manifesting together. So what is resolved in that webinar? And we remember that I am creation and I can manifest my own reality. Each facet of connection with my soul without the limiting belief systems will enter the container of the webinar. As more and more people enter the webinar, each one of us will transform specific topics and add that into this timeline. So the timeline will start developing and start growing. So once you drop into that vessel, it's like a living tree. So the timeline is seen like a living tree. And so the intention may be to manifest, for example. And if I stay in the center of the core, I know I can manifest anything that I put my intention to once my system is clear of those limiting belief systems. Now, if one person in the webinar has that complete information, that is like the vein to the tree. Then someone else will bring in another belief system, transform it, and add another line in that tree, or the tree will start expanding, expanding, expanding. Now, then you're working and transforming timelines, past, present, future. When you drop in that space, there is no time in that space because you're in the quantum field. So the webinar vessel itself is a tree which is creating a new timeline. And the more of us dropping our information into that timeline, the more we start manifesting a new future. This is how, when I say it's a living recording, it's a living tree of life, which is adding more codes, more alignment into, or more opportunities to manifest a new future. So as we keep watching the webinars again and dropping back into that timeline, it supports us to start manifesting whatever that intention was in that webinar. So each of the webinars, in a way, if you see it as a larger tree of life, each of the webinars are building and building and building maybe the roots, and then we work on the base, and then we work on the eyes, or we work on the hearing. So it's the brain. It's working on building up this tree of life. Now, in the webinars, it's pure creation without the limiting belief systems. So the more you're dropping into the system without pushing the system and judging the system, the more you start manifesting creation in your life in coherence. That is not saying that the topics will be resolved completely in the webinar. Maybe you need to experience in your daily life a new choice. So you've cleared it on a core level, your core has got wider, and then you experience it in daily life and you make a new decision, or you see the programs playing out for what they are and you don't put the energy in. So in the webinars, a lot of the time as well, I'm working silently. The reason for that is when you really work on the topics, the root of the topics, the core topics, it's usually before the mind was part of that experience. So there can be topics from the womb before that you don't even know is there. And then you cover it over with a belief system, or maybe it's from the ancestors. Maybe it's your parents' experience in the womb. So a lot of the topics that I'm working with in the webinars are not conscious, they're in the subconscious layers. So we're working with frequency and holding space for the physical body cellularly to breathe in and resolve it. It's like the energy moves. Now, when the energy moves, maybe you get an emotional response, or your mind becomes active, or your mind races, or your heartbeat races for a little bit and then relaxes. That's when the frozen information suddenly moves, and it's resolving itself at that point and detoxing it as well on many different levels. So it'll keep working in your system. So if you imagine the tree of life and there's frozen parts in that tree, and then you go to those parts and you hold space for them, for the frozen parts until they melt, and then it moves. And when it moves, then spirit, your spirit can embody into the tree without the limiting belief systems. This is how the webinars are working. So that's why I often work in silence with a little bit of guidance, because there's so many systems being resolved at one time. So we're dropping into the quantum field, and our spirit is coming into the vessel and cleaning or transforming what information is in the vessel. When you resolve the information in the vessel, because this is what you're creating, you're sending the information out vibrationally, frequency, like a hologram, and then you create that in your life. So as your vessel gets clearer, as you become more whole as spirit, then you move into higher states of consciousness, of creation, and you start manifesting as a creator. So this is how the webinars are working. To stay in creation is to stay in your center, to stay balanced, to observe what you are not anymore without judgments, to see things clearly for what they are without judgments. The reason I say without judgments is if I judge a system that's been created by the human on this planet, I am part of that system on some level, because that is in my genetics on some level. Some of my ancestors was part of that system. Some level of me has been part of that system. So then I'm splitting from myself. So it's very important for transformation not to go into separation and judgments, to honor the separation, to honor that I will not behave like that, to see it for what it is, and raise to new levels of consciousness. So in the webinars, a lot of the time it's in silence with some guidance, and the transformation happens in that moment because we're out of time and space. We're in the quantum field where there is no time and space, and we're creating new timelines and manifesting new timelines then in our lives with new levels of consciousness, because you just released limiting belief systems. As I said, each of the webinars are building on themselves, and we're becoming more whole. We're remembering who we are. So then, as I said, your spirit is more in the body, a clearer vessel, and then you start manifesting as a creator here on earth. It's important as well about staying present. That will bring you more into state of presence, because now you just turned off those movies that were in your system, and now you can stay present. So your nervous system is being present. And the more present you are, the more you're connected to creation. When you're not being present, it simply means that there's too much information open in your system, and you're vibrating on the old holograms of your past experiences, wounds, or your ancestors, even past lives. And then you start projecting this into your life, into your reality, and this starts manifesting around you. So that's why, for me, it's important to switch off the news, for example, to realize things are programming us, to realize what I put into my body, I manifest as well, because that's part of the hologram. So as I accept things in my body, I am starting to create whatever I'm putting into my body as well. Now, I am more than the physical. So even if I put things in my body or change my DNA, when I go into a state of pure presence, I am more than that physical change. So I start remembering who I am as a creator. So there's many, many gifts and many ways we can transform. And I'll explain step by step different stages of transformation in each of the webinars, or maybe in the future teachings as well. I wanted to share a few keys with you so you realize what's happening in the webinars. If you're entering the webinar space, if you find your mind is active, it's perfect. It's exactly what's meant to happen, because it's activating those memory fields, the stories, which want to pull you out. In reality, you just simply observe them, because these are the movies that's in your system, which is being resolved at the moment through the webinar. Not directly at that story, but the root of the story. And when you clear the root of the story, then that story suddenly starts flickering out of the system and loses its power. Also, for me, it's important to be, so for me, I like to sit up, for example. You can lie down if you want. When you sit up, you become more aware of your spine. You become more aware of your body and your organs. Because within the webinars, I'm really focusing on embodiment, because I know that the holograms are in the physical body. And the more we become aware of the physical body, the more shifts I'm going to make. Often when you are dropping into the physical body, maybe you get sleepy, because what it's opening is it's opening up the information where you may, in your childhood or your ancestors, got out of the body, because it's clearing the heavier, denser frequencies. The denser frequencies are no judgments. It's just lower vibrational mindsets. And as we go into lower vibrational mindsets, which are very important, we all have them in us. It's very important to resolve them, because that's what grounds us. That's what brings us back into the body. That's what brings spirit into the body fully. So it's very important to work with these denser frequencies that's in all of us, and not to go into a state of judgment, but go into a state of consciousness and acceptance that they're there. Not accepting the behavior pattern I'm talking about, but accept they're in the system and give them space. When you give something space, you bring consciousness in, and you bring awareness in. And without even saying it, you bring love in. And then you bring transformation in. So that's why I often work with the denser frequencies first, what are in the system, so your spirit can embody more and root more and get more into the cells, more into the bones. For me, it's very important to embody. And that's why I focus really on the embodiment of your spirit as a creator. And then whatever is in the physical body, which is density or lower vibration mindsets, lower levels of consciousness without judgments, simply accepting they're there, then I can move to higher states of consciousness. First, it's to plug into the system fully and to transform what is in our own system, because we chose this as a soul to clear the density and transform and move to higher states of consciousness. This is how the collective will move to higher states of consciousness and bring more coherence of creation into our lives, our daily lives, and start manifesting a new life. It's self-responsibility. We do it within ourselves because we created this reality around us, and we are responsible for it, so we can transform it. So I hope those keys about entering the webinars were useful for you. And yeah, if there's anything else that comes up, I will leave more information. Thank you for being part of the webinars. And it's really brave of you to enter the webinars into that space, because you are creating a new future and you're going beyond your belief system, beyond your fears. So I want to thank you for being part of the webinars, for being part of this incredible group that we're all going in with the one intention to transform, to better ourselves, become more whole, to create a more coherent future. And the more of us do that, the more the timelines start manifesting, and we transform what is keeping us in lower states of consciousness on this planet at the moment. So once again, thank you for being part of the group vessel. Thank you for making it stronger, because each one of us is transforming and bringing new information into the system and making that tree of life more active, more strong, more clear, more direct, so all of us can manifest on new levels of consciousness. The more who come into the system, the stronger that timeline comes, and we start manifesting it. So I want to thank you again for being part of this webinars and for being part of creating our new future for ourselves and our children. Have a beautiful, conscious, and I invite you to reflect this information and feel how it sits in your system. Thank you. And thank you for being part of the webinars.